Deep in the heart of autumn, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting eerie shadows across the landscape, Jake found himself on a desolate road that seemed to stretch into the unknown. The moon shone faintly through the thick canopy of gnarled trees that lined the sides of the road, their branches looming like skeletal fingers ready to snatch him away. Jake's knuckles whitened as his grip tightened on the steering wheel, the only reassuring presence in the midst of the encroaching darkness. His headlights sliced through the mist that seemed to cling to the road like a shroud, revealing glimpses of abandoned houses with shattered windows and overgrown gardens. The silence was unsettling, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustling of unseen creatures in the underbrush. As he drove on, a strange feeling began to creep over Jake, as though he was being watched by unseen eyes. He tried to shake off the unease, chalking it up to fatigue or his imagination running wild. But then, from the corner of his eye, he saw a figure dart between the trees. A shiver ran down his spine, and he hit the gas, urging his car to put distance between him and whatever lurked in the shadows. The road seemed to twist and turn in unnatural ways, leading Jake deeper into the heart of the wilderness. He could have sworn he saw movement in his rearview mirror, shapes that seemed to flicker in and out of existence. Panic set in as he realized he had lost his way, the road becoming an intricate labyrinth of uncertainty. A sudden, bone-chilling wind swept through the car, extinguishing his sense of direction. The headlights flickered, casting erratic shadows that danced menacingly around him. His heart raced as he desperately looked for any sign of civilization, but the landscape was a monotonous sea of darkness. Then, a blood-curdling scream pierced the silence, jolting Jake in his seat. He slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt. His breath came in ragged gasps as he tried to steady himself, grappling with the harrowing realization that he was not alone. Whispers seemed to echo all around him, a symphony of eerie voices that seemed to be just beyond comprehension. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw shadows moving, elongated and misshapen, as if they were alive. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure the unseen presence could hear it. With trembling hands, Jake fumbled for his phone, desperately trying to call for help. But the device was inexplicably dead, leaving him isolated in this nightmare. As his panic rose to a fever pitch, a faint, distant light appeared in the distance. A dim beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. Summoning every ounce of courage, Jake started the car once more and followed the light. The path was treacherous, the road now barely recognizable as such. But the light grew brighter, and as he drew closer, he realized it was coming from an old, dilapidated cabin. The door creaked open, revealing a haggard old man with hollow eyes. "Lost, are you?" the man rasped, his voice carrying an eerie familiarity. "You've wandered into a place where the boundary between our world and the otherworldly is thin. Few make it out." With a mix of desperation and determination, Jake begged the man for help, recounting the horrors he had encountered on this nightmarish drive. The old man's eyes softened, and he motioned for Jake to step inside. There, by a flickering fire, he began to tell a tale of a cursed road that twisted through time and space, drawing lost souls like moths to a flame. As the night wore on, Jake listened, his fear giving way to fascination. And as dawn broke, the old man led him back to his car, pointing him in the direction of the real world. The road ahead was clear, the shadows no longer alive with sinister intent. With a deep breath, Jake drove away, forever changed by the nightmarish journey that had tested the boundaries of his reality. On a moonless night, under a canopy of dense, overhanging trees, Alex found themselves driving along a desolate road. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional hoot of an owl or the rustling of unseen creatures in the underbrush. The only source of light was the dim glow of their car's headlights, which seemed to dissipate into the inky darkness just a few feet ahead. As they continued down the winding road, a strange sensation of unease began to creep over Alex. The road seemed to stretch on forever, and the feeling of isolation grew more intense with each passing mile. The woods on either side of the road appeared to close in, the branches and shadows forming menacing shapes that seemed to watch their every move. Suddenly, the radio crackled to life, emitting a burst of static that made Alex jump. They quickly turned it off, hoping to dispel the sudden jolt of fear that had surged through them. But as the radio fell silent, a new sound emerged, a faint, eerie melody that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. It was a haunting tune, carried by the wind, that sent shivers down their spine. Trying to shake off the growing sense of dread, Alex focused on the road ahead, their grip on the steering wheel tightening. The road seemed to twist and turn in impossible ways, leading them deeper into the heart of the unknown. Their surroundings grew even darker, the trees pressing closer, and the shadows growing more sinister. As the minutes turned into hours, the passage of time itself seemed to distort. Alex's eyes played tricks on them, as fleeting figures darted across the road, disappearing into the darkness before they could be fully seen. The tension in the air became palpable, as if the very atmosphere held secrets too terrible to reveal. Suddenly, the car's engine sputtered and died, plunging Alex into an all-encompassing darkness. Panic set in as they tried to restart the car, their hands trembling on the keys. Just as they were about to give up, the headlights flickered back to life, revealing a figure standing in the middle of the road ahead. Frozen with terror, Alex watched as the figure slowly turned to face them. It was a spectral figure, its features obscured by the shadows, but its eyes glowed with an otherworldly light. The haunting melody grew louder, wrapping around them like a suffocating shroud. Summoning all their courage, Alex stepped out of the car, their heart pounding in their chest. The figure beckoned, its outstretched hand an invitation into the unknown. As they approached, a voice whispered in their mind, cold and inviting, promising secrets beyond imagination. But just as Alex was about to cross the threshold, a sudden realization struck them. They were on the precipice of something unthinkable, something that would consume them entirely. With a surge of strength, they turned away, sprinting back to the car, the figure's anguished wail echoing in the night. As the engine roared to life once more, Alex sped away from that accursed road, leaving behind the haunting melody and the malevolent presence. The drive back to civilization was a blur, but the memory of that night would forever be etched in their mind, a reminder of the thin veil between the ordinary and the terrifying, and the darkness that can lurk just beyond the headlights' reach. On a moonless night, the wind howled through the trees like a haunting symphony. A dense fog enveloped the road, reducing visibility to mere feet ahead. Brian, an adventurous soul, decided to embark on a solo night drive through the remote countryside, despite the warnings of the locals. As he navigated the winding roads, the only sounds were the creaking of his steering wheel and the rhythmic thumping of his heart. The eerie silence was broken by the faint sound of a child's laughter echoing in the distance. Brian's heart skipped a beat. He was miles away from civilization, so who could possibly be out there? Ignoring the unnerving feeling in his gut, Brian pressed on. The laughter continued to echo, now growing louder and more sinister. Suddenly, a pair of glowing eyes appeared in his rearview mirror, reflecting the dim light of his headlights. Panic surged through him as the eyes seemed to draw closer with every second. His foot pressed harder on the gas pedal, and the engine roared as he tried to escape whatever was following him. The laughter morphed into a chilling whisper that seemed to emanate from all directions, surrounding him in an otherworldly chorus. The fog thickened, creating an impenetrable wall around him. Brian's heart pounded as he realized he was lost. The road seemed to stretch on forever, twisting and turning in impossible ways. His headlights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the trees that lined the road. The whispers grew louder, filling his mind with a cacophony of sinister voices. Desperation overtook him, and he reached for his phone, hoping to call for help. But as he glanced at the screen, he froze. The screen displayed a distorted, grotesque face staring back at him. He dropped the phone in horror, watching as it disappeared into the abyss of the fog. His car sputtered and came to a halt. The laughter and whispers intensified, closing in from all sides. Brian's breath hitched as he saw figures moving in the fog, their forms shifting and distorting in unnatural ways. The air grew icy cold, and he could feel their icy fingers brushing against his skin. With trembling hands, Brian fumbled for the car keys, desperately trying to restart the engine. The figures drew closer, their twisted forms now visible in the dim light. Their hollow eyes bore into him, and their ghastly faces contorted into grotesque smiles. Just as he thought all hope was lost, the engine roared to life. Without hesitation, he slammed his foot on the gas pedal and sped forward, the fog swirling in his wake. The figures disappeared into the mist, their laughter and whispers fading into the distance. Finally, Brian emerged from the fog-covered road and onto a main highway. His heart still raced, and his hands trembled on the steering wheel. As the first light of dawn broke through the horizon, he realized he had narrowly escaped an encounter with something beyond the realm of the living. From that night on, Brian could never forget the chilling laughter, the haunting whispers, and the twisted figures that had pursued him through the fog. He learned a lesson that stayed with him for the rest of his life. Some roads are best left untraveled, especially on moonless, fog-shrouded nights. On a moonless night, under a sky cloaked in darkness, Emily embarked on a solitary journey along a desolate stretch of road known as the Whispering Highway. Its reputation for being haunted had spread far and wide, but Emily, a skeptic at heart, paid no heed to the eerie tales. She wanted a change of scenery, a break from the routine, and what better way than a moonlit drive through the countryside? As Emily's car glided through the winding road, the trees seemed to lean in menacingly, casting elongated shadows that danced alongside the vehicle. The wind whispered mournful melodies, echoing the tales of tragedy that had befallen those who dared traverse this route after sundown. An unsettling chill seeped into the car, causing Emily to shiver despite the heater being on full blast. The radio, tuned to a static-filled station, crackled intermittently, creating an eerie ambience that sent shivers down her spine. Ignoring her unease, Emily continued driving, her grip on the steering wheel growing tighter. Out of the corner of her eye, Emily caught a glimpse of a figure standing by the roadside. She slammed on the brakes, heart racing, only to find an empty stretch of road ahead. Confused and unnerved, she dismissed it as a trick of her imagination. But as she resumed her journey, a distant silhouette seemed to appear and vanish at the edge of her vision, each time growing closer. The road itself seemed to play tricks, morphing and twisting as if determined to keep Emily trapped within its clutches. Signs that should have guided her became unreadable, and familiar landmarks transformed into unfamiliar terrain. Panic began to gnaw at her resolve, her sense of direction slipping away. The radio crackled once again, the static now alternating with faint, eerie whispers that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. Emily's pulse quickened, and she fumbled with the radio dial, desperately searching for a clear signal. Instead, the whispers grew louder, intertwining with a haunting melody that clawed at her sanity. Amidst the chaos, the figure by the roadside reappeared, this time closer than before. Emily's heart raced as she realized the figure's eyes gleamed with an unnatural light, fixated on her. She tried to accelerate, but the car's engine sputtered and died, leaving her stranded in the middle of the Whispering Highway. In the distance, a mournful howl echoed through the darkness, followed by a chorus of eerie laughter that seemed to rise from all around her. Shadows converged, forming grotesque shapes that slithered toward her immobilized car. Panicking, Emily fumbled for her phone, but the screen remained blank, as if drained of life. A cold, clammy hand pressed against the window, leaving a frosty imprint that spread like tendrils of ice. Emily's breath hitched in her throat as the figure outside leaned closer, its eyes boring into hers with an insidious hunger. The whispers in the air grew louder, forming words that spoke of forgotten sins and long-buried secrets. Tears streamed down Emily's face as she closed her eyes, a desperate prayer escaping her lips. Just as despair threatened to consume her, a distant glimmer of headlights pierced the darkness. The figure outside recoiled, disappearing into the shadows, and the whispers began to fade. A passerby had come to her rescue, pulling over to help jumpstart Emily's car. As the engine roared to life, Emily glanced one last time at the Whispering Highway, its sinister aura now diluted by the approaching dawn. With a heavy sigh of relief, she drove away, forever haunted by the chilling night drive and the horrors that had lurked along that desolate road. On a moonless night, under a canopy of gnarled trees, a lone driver named Emily embarked on a journey down a desolate road. She had heard whispers of a mysterious shortcut that would save her hours on her trip, but as the clock ticked closer to midnight, doubt crept into her mind. The road seemed narrower than she remembered, the trees looming over her car like bony fingers reaching out from the shadows. As Emily drove deeper into the woods, an eerie fog rolled in, reducing visibility to a mere few feet. The only sounds were the distant hoots of owls and the crunch of gravel beneath her tires. Her unease grew with every passing moment, the sense of isolation intensifying. Suddenly, her headlights flickered, then died, plunging her into an inky blackness. Panic set in as Emily fumbled for her phone, hoping to use its feeble light to find her way. But the phone's battery was nearly drained. She hesitated, torn between staying in her car or venturing out into the unknown. The decision was made for her when a chilling whisper seemed to fill the air, as if the very wind carried a sinister message. With her heart racing, Emily stepped out of her car, her footsteps echoing on the gravel road. Shadows danced around her, and she felt as if unseen eyes were watching her from the surrounding woods. Each step felt heavier, the woods seemingly growing denser around her. Shapes that appeared human-like but not quite flickered at the edges of her vision. A distant light caught her attention, a dim glow emanating from what looked like an abandoned cabin. Against her better judgment, Emily followed the light, her trepidation outweighed by the hope of finding help or at least a place to rest. The cabin was old and weathered, its windows covered in cobwebs. As she stepped inside, a cold breeze sent shivers down her spine. Inside, the cabin was a labyrinth of twisted corridors and creaking floorboards. Whispers seemed to echo through the halls, the walls almost breathing with a life of their own. She stumbled upon a room filled with dusty books and old photographs. The photos depicted scenes of celebration, but the faces of the people were distorted and twisted, frozen in expressions of anguish. Emily's heart pounded as she continued to explore, the walls now seemingly closing in around her. In one room, she discovered a mirror that reflected not her own image, but a gaunt, hollow-eyed version of herself. The room grew colder, the air thick with a sense of impending doom. She felt as if she was being watched by a malevolent presence that had lingered here for centuries. In a panic, Emily fled the cabin, her steps guided by an instinct to escape at any cost. The woods seemed to stretch on forever, the fog now a suffocating shroud that clung to her like a second skin. She ran until her lungs burned, until her legs could carry her no further. Finally, as dawn's light began to break, she stumbled upon a main road, a sense of relief washing over her. As Emily told her harrowing tale to the authorities, they were skeptical, attributing her experience to exhaustion and the power of suggestion. But Emily knew what she had witnessed that night was real. And though she eventually reached her destination, she couldn't shake the feeling that a part of the darkness she encountered on that night drive still lingered within her, a chilling reminder of the unknown terrors that could be lurking just beyond the edge of reality.